Do you bleed American? Well, maybe you'll answer that question with this episode. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
And this week we will be going a bit into the pop punk side of things by discussing Jimmy Eat World's 2001 album, Bleed American. This was our poll choice for the 2000s, inspired by the Ocean's Calling Festival. I don't think either of us were expecting this one to win, but it did. So we're here discussing Jimmy Eat World. We go all over the place here.
We are definitely all over the place. And now we're at Jimmy Eat World.
Yes, we are. But some good news is we'll be living up to the tea promise of our title. There was a lot of tea for this album and the making of it.
Definitely was. I was surprised. Well, I always forget what years things happen. So I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised, but it's always neat to see albums that come across different like milestones in American history and how it affects the album.
Yeah, there was a big one this year, but we're not going to start with that. The story of Bleed American actually begins a couple of years earlier in 1999, when I'm not quite clear on what it was, but Jimmy Eat World left their label / they were dropped from Capitol Records. One of the two, probably a combination of both. They didn't feel like they were on Capitol's priority list, and their third album, their second with the label Clarity, didn't do that hot for them, so they left Capitol.
Yeah, they left on a legal and I won't say positive note. From what I could put together, that was Clarity was their end of deal. That was the second album that they were contracted with them. Mm-hmm. And that I believe the band had gone on to say later on that the company was under new management with a new president and a whole bunch of crap. And they felt, even as young artists and working artists, that it was just too unorganized and they were falling, into the cracks.
I mean, they could have been dropped possibly too if the sales weren't good enough, I guess.
I mean, 14-minute songs.
Yeah,
aren't necessarily, they had a 14-minute song on there, and as much as I respect a good old long jam, it's not what's going to sell necessarily inside of their genre or their crossover genres, in my opinion.
Oh no, not at all, because this is primarily a pop punk band. Some have called it emo. I don't think that's 100% accurate, but pop punk I would agree with. The good news is I don't think they're as grating as other pop punk bands. I'll say that right now because...
Agreed. I read power pop, and I like that too. There's some power pop here, I guess. Yes. I don't know if I've ever used that as a genre, but power pop, I can feel it. I can see where you're at.
Definitely, and there's good influences from that genre. I feel like that's very like the Cars, Cheap Trick, and in the 90s, Weezer. Yeah. So definite influences here, and I would say positive ones in my opinion, because all great bands, but talking about this band still, the Weezer will come up again a bit later, but not quite yet. Yeah, Jimmy Eat World, they were without a label, and so they took up odd jobs, and they released a compilation on a independent label called Singles and went on a tour in Europe that their management advised against, because they weren't big enough, but the band said, forget it, we're doing it, and dropped their management. They were free agents, and the proceeds from that tour and the sales of the Singles Rarities compilation funded the recording of their fourth album, which was Bleed American, and their producer, Mark Trombino, had worked with them previously, liked working with them, and he offered the work for free until after the album's release, which is insane.
Every part of this whole entire getting to this album is mad respect. I mean, this is the plight of your everyday trying to make it as a rock star. These guys went from having albums already out there and then having to go back to like doing stuff like selling car parts, selling art equipment, I can't remember all four of the jobs, but they were working. And then to be like, screw it, like, like a lot of artists that are listening know how it feels. You're like, we got to do a tour and it's going to be out of our pocket and we're not going to be able to pay a few people, but there's that much love in our camp that we're going to see this through. I mad respect reading about how this came to be.
Yeah, and it was like that the whole time. The drummer, Zach Lind, actually was worried that the check for mixing the album would bounce because he feared the band was close to bankruptcy, which is insane. But there was a confidence that this album was going to be good. It was going to be successful. They had that confidence in their work at this time, which is something, I will say, especially to take such a big risk. But they decided to change things up because they knew what they'd done. It wasn't that they didn't like it, but they decided, well, we need to do something else because we can sell more records. And they decided no more 14, 16-minute songs. We're going to make shorter songs, more direct, simpler. And that was what they did with this album. And there actually ended up being a bidding war between labels because once the songs were coming out, label executives were loving it, including Capitol. They offered to re-sign them after they heard the finished album.
I read that they had to lock the door during recording, like literally lock the studio doors because A&R just kept coming around. And they finally were like, look, we're not on the market, so to speak. We're recording this and then you guys can fight it out. I love that.
Yeah.
If anybody listening doesn't know what A&R is, I got that right, Charlie?
Yeah,
A&R?
artists and repertoire.
Yeah, it's basically like if you were akin to like a sports team and you were coming up as a player, them looking for talent, or really just any scout. They're scouting for talent is the bottom line, and they had to lock the door on the scouts. So I love it.
Yes, and with all that bidding, Jimmy Eat World chose to go with DreamWorks Records. I didn't know that was a thing. I know them as an animation studio. Big year for them. This was the year the first Shrek movie came out, actually. Wow. So pretty crazy how that happened. A big thing for both the record and movie divisions of DreamWorks. And the album was called Bleed American, and the cover was taken from a photo called Memphis by William Eggleston, and it was released in July of 2001. And the album was a success. Like within the first 4 months of release, it had already outsold the previous album, and it sold like 173,000 copies. But as you alluded to earlier, on September 11th, 2001, the world forever changed with the horrific attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City. And the band was worried our album title might be misinterpreted after this tragedy. So in December of 2001, they just changed the title to Jimmy Eat World. And the album was not reverted back to its original title until 2008, actually. Probably a smart move on their part.
It was 100% a smart move, but regardless if it came from the label or if it came from the artists, what a great thought, rather than fighting it and being like, nah, this is the album, That's the way America was then, too. We were all bonding together across the board. So it's good to see people thinking about happiness and love. Maybe that came from the love that they were experiencing inside their camp. I don't know the guys, but maybe they're like super stand-up dudes, which hopefully they are.
I would hope so. And it was also smart because then you don't have to recall the album. It's just, well, we'll just change the title and keep pressing it because this was the CD era. And, they sold a good amount of CDs. The album was platinum by the end of 2002.
Mind-blowing. I read that. I was like, shoo, gone.
Yeah, after 3 albums that hadn't even gone gold, Jimmy Eat World had a platinum album. And this album's really well received by the pop, punk, and emo listeners. And it's often been credited with helping make that sound mainstream. I actually would say 2002 was a really big year for pop punk coming forth, but they did it even a bit before Avril Lavigne released her first album in 2002, which was Let Go. And that was a huge album, and admittedly, she's a pop star, but she is very much credited with helping bring that pop punk sound forth with songs like Skater Boy, which I can see.
I'll tell you right now, in 2002, I was almost removed, or in that era, I was almost super all the way removed from popular music and listening to, I'll say 98% Fish at this point. And these songs, of course, bled through. Like the songs that I heard and didn't even realize I heard, and I'll talk about this later. I used to make fun of this genre a lot. for me, it was like crying and sold out, and it mimicked a lot of guys that I respected. Again, I was a younger man back then, but that's how I felt. So to speak to the way that it was regarded and taken on by the people, it made it through that.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of this genre, the way you felt about it then's the way I feel about it now. And it's not because of this band. There have been many bands since this that have come forth and done this pop punk emo sound. And I agree with you. I think a lot of them are inferior musicians to those that they're taking steps from. And it is whiny. I don't think the lyrics are great. I'm not going to say I've never felt sorry for myself, but I feel like that's what a lot of it is. And I just don't fully get how... I mean, I understand feeling nostalgic for your era of music, but a lot of people my age still love this stuff and find it relatable. And I'm like, but why? I'm like, I don't love everything I listened to in middle school. There's some stuff I still like, but not all of it.
Well, I mean, we stick with the divisiveness of the artist, of music in its purest form. But I agree with you to the point of this genre always came a bit shrill to me, and I wrote off most of it looking back, and shame on me for not listening. And what a great chance that we get to listen to albums like this, because we're doing this beautiful podcast together. But the bottom line is it always hit shrill to me, and I cut it off. And I can see where you're talking about. I don't know what it is about this genre. I can't put my finger on it. We could keep talking in circles about it, but it's just, it hits different, and it always didn't settle correct with me.
And it doesn't settle correct with me to this day, so this one was a bit of a challenge for me, but I don't think this is fully an emo album, fortunately, so that made this easier than it could have been, so I'll say that right now. But yeah, I really don't have much else to add. I'm just kind of, I guess, ready to do our thing and go into it, Just real quick, on the flip side of that coin, I listened to this album for this listen through 10 times more than I've listened to the albums before, and it took me a hot minute. 100% see-through right now. It took me a hot minute to get out of the automatic negativity I had for the genre. And I did. I made it through. I'm sorry. I could go on it forever. It's crazy. Let's break it down. Yeah. Two pop punk haters take on Jimmy Eat World.
We're not haters. We just... we're haters. Go on.
We're kind of haters of this genre. Sorry, but I'm sure all the people who bought Blink-182 tickets will attack us if they're listening, because they're on an arena tour. But
this is a whole rabbit hole, because Blink-182 has the numbers to back that shit up that can rival Michael Jackson, which is crazy. This is another podcast. I've fought this battle for years. This is another podcast.
I piss people off by saying Blink-182 sucks, and I'm sorry they do.
Look, everybody's turned the podcast off.
They should not still be popular enough to be headlining arenas. That's terrible, in my opinion. And I wanted to say that because that eats away at me, man. It really does.
That's the hottest take I think I've ever heard you say. There's a lot of people selling out arenas that I think are... way more subpar, and I don't give them. Again, this is another podcast.
Well,
in its entirety.
You're not wrong, but there's I don't get it. They should have gone down to the smaller venues by this point. Why? But anyway, moving on, because this isn't about Blink-182. Thank God. It's about Jimmy Eat World, and we're going to be discussing this album, and it begins with the title track, Bleed American. This song was naturally retitled when the album was retitled to Salt, Sweat, Sugar, because that's the first phrase in the chorus, and I feel like this is an attempt at social commentary. The group said that it was about how we let trivial things get to us. I get that kind of. I think this song's very catchy. I'll give it that. I don't think this kind of social commentary, because that's what I do think it is. I read it as social commentary. And I don't think that's fully in their wheelhouse to go about it this way. to make a comment on our society. I think they do a better job of it elsewhere, of making a social commentary about a hard issue. This one doesn't really cut it for me. What do you think of it?
Right off the bat, power chords equal a powerful start on this track. The power chords sing, and the lyrics are pretty straightforward in their fact on society. I think the band was quoted saying that a lot of this album was in a second person, or sang in second person. And reading it over and over again, I can see the plight of the younger guy inside of this time period. And that's who they are. Once I got to the point where I started to give respect to them for just who they were and how hard they worked for it, and I started to read these lyrics more, it sounded like almost a lot of this album sounds like it. And they went on to say that as well, is that it stands true throughout the album, but it's just something that they were dealing with. The refrain lick in this song is one of those hooks. It's one of those hooks that are going to stay around. They'll always catch ears. Well done. And they produced a lot of this album too. It's produced very well. It's a good first track.
Yeah, it's a good album opener. I will give it that. And one really positive thing I have to say, I did find the live performance of the band doing this song on the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn way before James Corden was doing it. And the live performance was awesome. I mean, I could definitely see these guys are dynamic live performers looking at it, and I give them a lot of credit for that. And I do think that helped their album sales. I think there were people exposed to them who saw this band live and thought, wow, like these guys are awesome. They really work hard up there. You can tell that in their performances, I think. And well, in this era, they were fortunate enough to get that platform with some of the bands that they opened for. But yeah, this was the first single from the album, which seems kind of crazy in retrospect, but it was. And it made it up to 18 on the alternative chart in the US, and it was top 60 in the UK and Scotland. So not as big as they'd get in this era, but better than where they've been. This was a success moment for them just to do this well. So good for them. I have nothing but respect for how hard they worked.
Yeah, this single was what, 3-4 months before the album actually launched?
No, it was around the same time. It was before the album was retitled.
Oh, got you. But I thought they had left it to radio before this had got released.
It was released before 9/11, so summer of 2001, this was released as a single.
Gotcha.
And it helped get their name out there, and that was what they were going for. So yeah, I think it sets the tone for what we're listening to. Well, I will definitely give it that, even if it's not 100% my cup of tea, but I do think it's well produced and catchy. And with that being said, now we're on to the second track, a praise chorus. This song I read as a love letter to great songs and how they can get you out of your shell, which I think is a beautiful message. And it fits this band well, because I think in a lot of ways they were singing to the outcasts on this album. I think they were trying to be a voice for that in a lot of ways. And it even references some classic songs in its bridge, I guess you could say. It would be the bridge. We get references to Crimson and Clover, originally Tommy James, later Joan Jett, Our House by Madness, Rock and Roll Fantasy by Bad Company, Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue, Why Did We Ever Meet, Don't Let's Start, All of My Everythings. I think this is a great message of a song. I'll give it that. I do think that the references are a bit disjointed. I think they do the best they can with putting it together, but I do think it's a bit disjointed. What do you think?
This song took a bunch of listens for me to actually realize what it was. And that is just what you were saying. This shout out to inspiration and to great songs. In fact, I heard the Crimson and Clover in it. And when I heard that, I was like, man, this is like so rip-offish. But once I read about this song and realized I'll use the word intricacy of putting all of those together in that bridge, I really enjoyed it. I give it extra points for that. It's a very smart song, and it's really neat how it slides under that, because it comes off with the same tempo almost of the first song of the album. Okay. And on first listen for me, even I love the guitar. I love the way the guitar falls off to muted chords and then ends up just being drums before the next verse starts after this bridge. But the music is almost on the same level as the first song. So without diving in and having so many listens to it and really gaining a newfound respect for what the song is, it's just a mediocre song to me. But with the epiphany of what the song is as a shout out back to their inspirations, it's a neat one. It's a very smart song.
Yes, I would agree that it's a smart song. It's not my favorite thing in the world to listen to, but I can appreciate the construction.
Yeah.
But now we're on to the big one. Track number 3, The Middle. This is one of those songs it's been omnipresent for the past 20 years at this point. I feel like it's one of those songs where you may think, I've never heard of this band. I don't know any of their songs, but you hear this song and you're like, oh, I know that song. It's definitely one of those. I feel it's that omnipresent in this country, at least for the past 20 years, because it's always been around in the background, if you get what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
When we went off air last week, that's literally what happened. I literally said to Charlie, hey, I'm not sure I know these guys. And he was like, you know them. And I was like, what? I put the album on. He was like, go to the middle. And I hit the middle. I was like, oh, I know. Okay. I know exactly who they are. So yes, it is. There's no way you can't know this song. And I don't say it very often. I say hard pressed a bunch, but shit, this is way past hard pressed. Everybody's heard this song.
No, if there's any song in this whole month that we've covered that everybody knows, and I'm counting the next album we're doing too, it's this song.
Heard.
It's one that can speak to everybody, I think. So the inspiration behind it was Jim Adkins, the band's lead singer, got an email from a middle school fan of theirs. And she worried that she wasn't punk enough. She felt like she was being excluded. But Jim thought, well, you being excluded, that's not very punk. He didn't think that was cool. And so he wrote this song as kind of a pick-me-up anthem, I would say. And recently, Tom Bryhan from Stereo Gum called this a quote-unquote gloriously good-hearted group hug emo anthem. And that's a perfect description right there. I've never thought of this as an emo song. I think this is much more in that power pop vein. I hear a lot of Weezer, even the Cars and Cheap Trick in this. That's what I hear in this, not emo. And also it's more uplifting than a lot of emo songs. Even the verses, I feel like, aren't that specific in being too depressing, which I appreciate about the song. And definitely helped it cross over in a way other emo songs just didn't, which it did. This was a huge hit, as I said. It was moderate in Europe, but in the US, inescapable. It made it up to number 5 on the Hot 100 and was 14 for the year. And this is another case of, much like with Franz Ferdinand last week, this wasn't the pop sound of the time. So this song was mentioned recently in the number ones column as a song that peaked behind the song that was number 1. And we're in the Murder Inc. era of the pop charts. The number 1 song when this song peaked was Ashanti's Foolish. So big 180 from this song. But it really caught on to a lot of people. And I think that it applied to the band and their story with having come up from these hard times with losing their deal and all that, working the odd jobs. They were stuck in the middle. And frankly, this was a crazy time for the country as well in the aftermath of 9/11. So this song just spoke to a lot of people at that time. And that's why I think this is a case of right place, right time for a song like this to break through.
Impeccably said. There's no other way around that. Right place, right time for a great song about, for me, I didn't see anything other than like the band's real plight coming through that. You know, it's one of those never give up, everything's going to be all right songs. And then on top of that, you have 9/11 happen. and this becomes the most played song on the radio all over, especially Canada. That actually was the most played song on the radio in Canada. But I mean, this one, there was no way around being happy when you heard it. It literally says everything's going to be all right. Fun fact on this one, I found out that there was a bootleg recording of Prince covering this song at an after party at the 2009 Oscars. And then they actually played it for him. And I could only imagine how much of a moment that would have been for them. You know what I'm saying? But that's how you want to talk about omnipresent. You're in 2009 and Prince is covering it at an after party, you know?
Yes. And Prince was definitely not pop punk. That's as far away as you can get from it.
I heard.
And this song spoke to him enough to cover it. And I think that says a lot. Yeah. And that was one cover I was going to mention. But there's another cover/guest performance I want to talk about a bit, because as I said, this song spoke to a lot of people. Some of those people were eventually musicians, and in 2002 a middle school girl named Taylor Swift heard this song.
Okay.
And it really spoke to her because she was rejected quite a bit at this age. She was not understood by her peers, and she loved the song. And there was a video I found of her covering it at an early concert of hers in 2008 at a college campus, which it's crazy to think Taylor Swift ever played at college campuses, but once upon a time she did. This was not recently, ladies and gentlemen. This was before she took over the world, which she pretty much has. But Taylor still loved the song, and a few years later in 2011, while on her Speak Now tour, she would do a thing during the show where she would have a special guest come out to do a duet with her. And one night in Glendale, Arizona, she had Jim Adkins of Jimmy Eat World come out, and they performed The Middle together at the concert. And the coolest part of this performance isn't actually the two of them singing. It's that mid-song, Taylor stops it and says, "This guy said that nobody would know who he was." And she asked her whole audience, sold-out arena crowd, to give Jim Adkins a hand for his music because he had such an inspiration on her. And she's continued to sing the praises of this band. She even would put their lyrics of not just this song, but deep cuts of theirs on her arm at shows during this tour. So she's a Jimmy Eat World diehard, actually. And
I could see at that age, you hear songs like this, got to hold on to the happy stuff.
Yeah. And it was interesting she did it on the Speak Now tour because that was the album where she actually went pop punk a bit for a couple of songs. But I thought it was very interesting that these guys were musical heroes of hers. It's not something you would automatically think with Taylor Swift, but it is the case. And I think that's awesome that she paid tribute to them in such a beautiful way at her concert way back then. And I mean, yeah, that says something about it. And I am certain that her influence got more people to listen to this band and album because she's Taylor Swift. She has that kind of power over people. So
there you go. There you go. A good way to up your heroes,
Yes. And I respect that she did that. So I'm a bit of a Swiftie, if you couldn't tell, I guess. But
Swiftie. Is that really what their fans are called? Swifties?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
Swifties.
I can't wait for her new album this Friday, actually. Cannot wait.
Oh, shit. I didn't even know that. There we go.
Yeah. So, oh no, I cannot wait. I think it's going to be awesome. It's called Midnights. I mean, what a cool album title.
Oh, let's go.
Yes, but
I love me some Taylor.
Yes, but sadly, we're done talking about her, and we're on to track number 4, which is Your House. This is a more stripped down track. I guess we needed to come down after the previous 3 songs. This is a real paint by the numbers breakup song. This is a filler for me. I can definitely see why this is one of the least streamed songs on the album. And admittedly, the middle's a hard act to follow. And I wouldn't entirely be surprised if there were some people who bought the CD and heard this and were like, well, what's the point in even going past this if it's going to be like this and we just heard the middle? What did I do? That's my take on Your House.
No, you just said it the most perfectly put way you could say it is now this is the first time in the album where really at the start of this track for me, it starts off and I can see a potential slowdown / palette cleanser here. And I'm like, okay, it makes sense. You know, we just had the anthem. We just had the hug it up. We just had the moment of the first big moment of the album so far. And it came off, like you said, of 3 powerful songs. But this song, I'll use the word filler, but this song is just, it never feels like a full thought to me. I don't care how many times I listen to it, it never feels finished. The percussion in the back of this song sticks the same rhythm throughout the whole entire song. And it really, for me as a listener, it really takes away from the power that could have been in this song. There are points where you could have broke this song or broke that beat or had a rest before a refrain that I feel like would have made this song pretty powerful. For me, it has this Kiss Me Sixpence None the Richer vibe, but in that sense, that song fills out where this song doesn't. I mean, go all the way to the end of the song and it just fades. And it for me, that just shows that incomplete thought. We talk about missed potential a lot. I think there was super missed potential here. And this is one of the first cases on the album where I feel like a lack of a big time producer on this, not taken away from their producer. I know it was like Brotherhood and the whole 9, but like a major league producer could have seen that and been like, all right, I can make a hit out of this song. I think there's a hit somewhere inside here, but for me, not the way it was put on this record.
Yeah, and it is weirdly placed on the record in between these dynamic tracks that really stand out. To have this just in the middle really kind of messes with the flow of this album, in my opinion.
It does. It really does.
And, but on a positive note, you know what is a good song? I hear Your House, I think of house songs. You know what is a good song?
What up?
Our House by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young.
Grew up on that song. That is a good one.
Yes, much better than Your House. So I wanted to end on a positive note and mention Our House because chance we can, we should, because that's a great song.
Heard. I was going pretty hard there too, so thank you for that.
Well, we have to be a bit more positive for our next track on the album, track number 5, Sweetness. This was actually originally intended for the Clarity album from 1999, but the album was already pressed and ready to go by the time they were ready to include it. So that didn't happen, but they played it regularly on the tour for Clarity. And they put it here instead because they knew they had a hit. And this is definitely a sing it back kind of song. They literally say that, sing it back, whoa. And it's got that dynamic feel. I have to say, hearing this, I thought this would have been so cool to hear at Ocean's Calling. Because I'm sure they would have done it. This would have been a great song to hear them do. And I think everybody would have just had the time singing it out loud. And it would have been quite epic. Sadly, Ocean's Calling didn't happen. Hopefully next year, though. Hopefully next year. Maybe Jimmy World can bring some sweetness with him next year. One can hope.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, this is a really dynamic, catchy song. It's got a pretty heavy riff that sticks like glue to you. And Zach Lind actually said that the drum beat on this song was inspired by Larry Mullen of U2, and I definitely hear that U2 were going to play to the rafters kind of thing, because U2 is a stadium band, and they make songs with that in mind, like we're going to play to the rafters. Like this definitely gives me a bit of a U2 vibe, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, this is a good song. It's one I feel like would be a lot more fun in a big crowd at a festival than just listening to it by yourself in your apartment like I did. I'll say that about it. What do you think?
I'm right there with you. I always try to go through albums, figure out what would be awesome live, or fantasize on like, wow, that would be a great encore. This is definitely a live piece. You want to go to the polar opposite of the way I felt on the production of Your House. The production on this song is I'll use the word perfect. I'll use the word perfect on this. The production on this song is pretty damn perfect. I'll tell you right now, in my closed-minded listening of this on radio for 2 minutes, or when people would sing it, I used to hate on this song straight up. I used to make fun of it. I used to call it sophomoric. I used to say it came out of poppy punk town. I definitely hated on this song. Listening to it and dissecting it, people are going to call me a hypocrite on this one, but I love this track. The way that they layer the guitar and bring this low to high power chord like resonating in the background is fucking genius. It really rounds out the song. At 155, when that piano hits just that single note or that single chord and keeps railing on it, and then it has a full break and the song is brought back on that phaser effect, shit, genius. Yeah, production at its finest, especially at its finest so far on this album for me. I enjoy this one. And I used to hate it.
Yeah, and if you couldn't tell because it was on the radio, it was a single. It was the third single, and it made it up to 75 on the Hot 100. So not as big as The Middle, but still a well-known song, and it has close to 140 million streams on Spotify, so it's clearly beloved by quite a few. But for some reason, for me, despite all the good things I can say about it, I agree with everything you said about it, but there's something still missing there for me. It just doesn't 100% add up for me. I feel like I should enjoy this song more than I do. I wish I did, but there's something there. And I think it is, in a way, maybe the musicianship and songwriter of this, not just this band, but this genre. I honestly, here's a hot tea take here. I think a lot of bands in this genre, I'm not a musician. I'm not going to say I could do it better myself, but I don't think that they're virtuosos on their instrument, anything even close to it. I feel like it's very high school talent show winners, get a record contract and a great producer. And so it sounds good. I feel like the production's elevating a track like this. Just my opinion, because I heard a lot of better musicians. I don't think these guys are bad musicians, but are there better out there? Yeah, and I think it's the case for a lot of these bands. To me, the compositions seem to be pretty simple, and that's not always a bad thing, but it's really elevated by good production, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do have to say, though, from what I've seen, going through and listening to some of their live performance and watching some of their live performance over the past week, I'm pretty sure they could pull this off. You know, I don't think it was produced over what they could pull off, but you're right. That happens way too often. I think they could pull this off live.
Oh, they could definitely pull this off live. I just wanted to make a more general point about my kind of issue with this genre, and it does apply to this song a bit because, like I said, there's just something not 100% adding up. I don't quite know what it is. My best guess is it is the sterility, I guess, of the genre, because I feel like that's how I would describe the music that we hear.
That's pretty spot on from me. It's a very sterile scene.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going down the scene line.
Yes, we are. But before we move on, a couple of fun facts. This song was a goal song for the Florida Panthers NHL team, and it was featured in EA Sports' NHL 2003 game for PS2. So I guess it's a hockey anthem. Who knew?
I'll tell you what, EA soundtracks across the board have brought my ears to songs that I never would have heard. So good for them getting on there.
Yes, and yeah, I'm sure that helped bring their music to a wider audience of people.
Yeah.
Bunch of hockey fans. There's probably like a secret club of hockey Jimmy Eat World fans out there.
Oh man, you're killing me. I love it.
Based on the song's presence in hockey, that's my guess. But
there you go. There you go.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Feud, Capote versus the Swans. Inspired by actual events, the series tells the story of Truman Capote and the women he betrayed. The original housewives. They were society's most elite women. Rich, glamorous socialites who defined a bygone era of high society New York. From creator Ryan Murphy, this drama series features an all-star cast, including Naomi Watts, Demi Moore, and Diane Lane. FX's Feud premieres January 31st on FX Stream on Hulu.
But I speak of sterility, however, fortunately, the next song on the album is not sterile. It's track number 6, Hear You Me. This is a really beloved non-single. This has over 87 million streams on Spotify, yet never a single, but has a touching backstory. So this is a tribute to two ladies named Michael and Carly Allen. They led the Weezer fan club and would follow that band regularly. And they sadly were killed in a car accident coming home from a Weezer concert, which is horrible. But Jimmy World knew these ladies. They were fans of them as well. And Jimmy World often opened for Weezer in this era in particular, in addition to Green Day, Blink-182, and Incubus, all big established bands that definitely helped this band get out there. And these two ladies often said the phrase, hear you me, and were so generous as to give the band a place to stay when they needed it on the road, which is a beautiful thing to do, in my opinion. So they wrote this as a tribute to them, and I do think this is a beautiful song. I do feel that it's from the heart. I feel like it could have been very cheesy easily, especially when the chorus begins with "May angels lead you in." That could have really gone down the sappy Treckley line, but I feel like it's out of that. Fortunately, I do feel that it's sincere, and it features vocals from Rachel Hayden of a band called That Dog, which I've never heard of, but I think that's a great band name. That Dog. And I think that she adds a lot to the song. It's the first of 4 songs she's featured on here, and I do think that her vocals help elevate the songs. And she doesn't really have a real aggressive voice. It's a very soft, pretty tone, and she's basically the 5th member of the band at this point in time. So there's that. What do you think of?
I'm going to come in here sound like a jerk after that, because I didn't realize that it had such a moving and gripping backstory. I did realize their work with Weezer, but I didn't know that this was a tribute song. This song does not fit for me at all. I couldn't find a way that it fits for me at all. It's a cool, nice, beautiful song. It literally is a beautiful song. There's some cool pieces in here, especially her voice. But for me, where, how, why, who, what are you doing putting that song on this album, especially at this point in the album? Then finding out that it was originally slated to be used for Adkins' orchestral side piece,
yes,
Go Big Casino, and it made sense there.
Yeah,
but not really for me on this album. This album was pounding, and I'll be honest, this is the first time that I really lost as a active listener, that I really lost my place, and I was like, oh man, okay, I'm not here really anymore.
I do agree that it's out of place on the album. My thought is that they thought this is a good song we wrote, and we want to include it where more people listen to it.
Heard.
But it is an odd fit here, and probably would have fit better with Go Big Casino, which I also think is an awesome name, by the way. I love that name.
I like it too.
Yeah. Honestly, both of those are better names than Jimmy World, in my opinion. That Dog and Go Big Casino. But, yeah, I like the song individually a lot, but I do agree with you that it's out of place on this album. But I do have one thing to say. Because of her fandom of them, I think Taylor Swift should do this song with them live and sing the girl part on the song.
Oh, she'd kill it. It'd be beautiful. Like I said, it's a beautiful song. It just, for me, I mean, we're doing this album. Nah, come on. And this is a 10-track album. Nobody would even blink an eye. Again, I sound like the heartless guy on it, but you're right. I would have to, if I was a betting man, which you know that I am, I would bet that they did put it on here so everyone could hear it and it could play for all the Weezer fans. I'm with that. I'm totally with that. But no, without that, it has no place on this album.
I agree. It was totally here so they could get a moving moment in their concert too, probably. I feel like this is a band that definitely, when they write songs, the impression I get from this album, they definitely take into consideration how they're going to sound live. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all, but I do think it's a consideration here for better or for worse. So, with that being said, we're on to track 7, If You Don't. Bit more of a standard breakup tune. I actually really like the hook of this song. If you don't know, why would you say so? Or, no, what is it? Yeah, that's it. I was right. If you don't, why would you say so? I like that refrain. It sticks to you. It is a bit redundant, but I think it's effective. And a bit relatable. I thought that about people before and their thoughts. What do you think of your special track 7 here?
I think my track 7 here is on a different album. Like, where in the hell are we now? We're like, that last one really, I mean, Hear You Me really was like, oh man, okay, all right. I don't understand the vibe here. Then we get here. And this one for me was even more out of place, or like, what album am I on? Because this one took those driving strums and rhythms that they've used and made their sound by this point, at least in the album, and that doesn't even work for me. Again, this is my opinion. That doesn't work for me at all here. Gun to the Head, definitely my least favorite, because Hear You Me is a beautiful song, but this is another one where I'm like, where are we at? What are we doing with this album here? Not my favorite. Not my favorite.
I wouldn't say it's my least favorite. I do agree with you about it being a bit out of place. This is quite a bit different sonically from what we were doing earlier. That was so dynamic, and I don't think it's a great song. I want to make something clear here.
Oh, you're good.
With this, because it's out of my genre, when it comes to albums like that, I really do try to amplify the positive points of it to make it sound as good as possible, even if it's not something I'd really go back and listen to after we're done recording this, which, is this a song I would go back and listen to after we're done with this? No, it's not.
No.
But yeah. I'm trying to point out the good parts of it. That's what I want to say.
No, and anyone who's ever listened to us understands, that we're here to praise music, period. But we also are breaking these albums down. We don't have a problem with sonic changes, I'll speak for myself on this one. I don't have a problem with sonic changes. I don't have a problem with concept changes inside of an album, but I do have a problem with throwing them wherever you want to. This album, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I just feel like, especially this song, we're hitting the back end. If this was a true vinyl, we're on the back, and I'm done listening at this point. In all honesty, the first side of this album was fire, I'll say, but you're here, and I'm almost 100% losing any want to listen to the album at this point.
I don't disagree with you about the second half. I do feel these songs are all on totally different pages. There is no cohesiveness with the second half of the album. I agree with you on that completely. And we have another big 180 with the next song, in fact, Get It Faster. And he's saying that cheating gets it faster. The only really fun thing I could find about this song was that the drums were programmed by a PlayStation video game called MTV Music Generator.
Are you joking?
No, I'm not. I saw that.
Finish your thought. I'm going to tell you about one of the best. Go on. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's really the only noteworthy thing about the song for me. I think this is a filler. This is the least favorite for me. This feels like a B-side song, not a song that belongs on an album. This feels like a B-side.
I heard.
That's all I gotta say.
I love the way that we get out of a super soft doldrum. I do think that song works well here. Finding out that the drums were done on MTV Music Generator, one, gives it like 20 million points in my book, because not a lot of people know about this. But back in the day on PlayStation 1, there was a 2-disc, basically like studio. I mean, it was a straight up studio sample maker, beat maker, period. But it was way ahead of it. It was like Cakewalk on, if anybody's familiar, or any producing software on PlayStation. So we would sit there and make beats for hours on hours. Super, super awesome production tool, and hidden behind an MTV Music Generator label. That's amazing. I haven't heard that name since the Clone Wars. That's real shit, man. That's awesome.
All right.
But yeah, it gets out of the slow part of this album. It's a cool song. You said B-track. It really is. It's one of those ones that you put out with a single that's not going to make the album. But I feel like that's where we are on this half of the album.
Oh, we are.
It's like, what are we doing here? I'll sum it up in the synopsis, but it just, for me, it ain't nothing.
Oh, I agree, unfortunately, but we're not at the end yet. We're on to track number 9, which is called Cautioners. Interesting song title. I think it's a cool song. I think that could even be a cool album title. The most noteworthy thing about this is it has these drum loops just repeated throughout, over and over again. I feel like the repetition's the point. It's a cool track. I do feel it gets a bit redundant considering the song's over 5 minutes long, but it's a cool track. It's more interesting musically than lyrically. I feel like this is just a redundant, boring breakup song. I think the drum loop's the really cool thing about it, in my opinion. That's the good thing, I would say.
The sound on this is cool, man. You're right. This song is cool musically. It has a little bit of a different feel than what we've been accustomed to throughout this album. And it's enjoyable to the ear. But if you go through the lyrics, it's cookie cutter in my opinion. You know, it's just like, all right, here we go. I like your point about the repetition, and that it lends itself to what they're saying here. But it really just it's a neat sounding track. It's a neat, another one that you could pop on the other side of a single.
Yeah. And one thing I read about this song, apparently it's been compared to The Cars, and just no, absolutely not. This is not interesting enough to be a Cars song, in my opinion. I mean, one, it's slow. Most of the Cars songs are very upbeat, but...
That's where I was going to go. Like, it's a little slow to be a Cars song, but...
I mean, but even if we're going to compare it to their big slow song, Drive, no, this is no Drive. It's not dynamic enough. Drive has a nice atmosphere to it. It has a great vocal performance that really stands out. It has meaning behind its lyrics. It's kind of basic. It's not deep poetry, but it cuts deeper than this. I just don't understand that comparison at all. And honestly, I would say that's insulting to Rick Ocasek.
Yeah.
Imagine if he'd produced this album, he would have whipped them into shape.
I don't see the line there in between those two. And Again, I said it before, I really think that a couple of these songs have hits inside them or have potential inside them that a major league producer like him could have done wonders for.
Yeah, I mean, he did produce Weezer, but admittedly, I think Weezer had stronger songs than these when he worked with them for the Blue album. Definitely, all those songs were stronger than these. So,
I mean, we're not here to shit on anything. You know, this doesn't hold a candle to Blue album, in my opinion.
Oh no. I'm sure that was an influence, but
most def you can hear Weezer influence. You go back to well, I won't go back, but yeah, I used to hate on it and be like, "This is a fake ass Weezer song." Back in the day,
Sweetness,
not this
you
song.
mean?
Yeah. But
it kinda is. I feel like we're listening to a second-rate
Weezer. Now, I won't take that away from him because knowing how close they were with Weezer and knowing how much of working musicians they were, I'd like to think that was just inspiration. You know, I have to get out of my closed-minded mindset of back then of like, oh, this is a sellout punk song. This is crap. Really, and I did. Like I said, when we started this, I got past that. This is me literally being critical, and it could have been any album at this point. I would have said the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, though, I feel like these guys I'm not the biggest Green Day fan in the world, but they're better than this a bit, I would say. Then at this point in the album we're doing, I feel like we're just kind of throwing shit together at this point. And
this second half is tough, man. It's tough.
It is.
Thinking there was a meeting and they were like, this is the track list and this is the order. I don't know. It's tough for me. Well, you know, we're not even at the grades yet. We sound like we're grading the album.
It's hard not to, though, when we're already at this point, though. But I have a bit more optimism for the penultimate track, which is track 10, the Authority song. This is not a John Mellencamp cover, but it mentions that song and is definitely influenced by it melodically.
I heard.
I'm glad that they didn't do a cover of John Mellencamp because that would not have worked with this at all. Totally different vibe.
Yeah, but they're referencing and they're smart. I won't take that away from them. There are times where they are very, very smart musicians, and I enjoy that, especially with this. And we harken back to the praise chorus. You know, if you're gonna take from the old boys, give a holler, and I love that. They're very smart that way.
Yes, and I'll say this now. I like this better than the praise chorus, actually.
Yeah, I hear you there.
I do like the melody of it. I mean, I do think they were inspired by somebody good with that. I mean, I'm not a diehard John Mellencamp fan, but he was one of the most consistent 80s hit makers, and he did consistently put out very nice, melodically sound tunes that still sound good today.
Heard.
So that's a credit on him, but I do think that they took it a bit better with this. I do think this is the best on the second half of the album by a mile.
By a mile. Hands down, this is my favorite song on the second half of this album.
Yeah, it's not a contest in that regard. This is one of the ones I actually did add to my Apple Music library. I did not add the whole album, but this one I did. I actually enjoyed it. I really like the backing vocals too.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't quite say it's brilliant, but it's enjoyable, and I like what they did here. I do.
Yeah, this is one of 3 songs that I added to my playlists as well.
Yeah. Authority song was a relative winner for us.
Yep, definitely.
So, yay for that. And now we are at the end of the album, My Sundown. And we're at a stripped down closer. This was also originally intended for Go Big Casino.
Yep.
But unlike Hear You May, this is lyrically the most emo song on the album, in my opinion. This is extremely self-pitying. No one cares. I could be so much more than this. And This is where I go back. This is my issue with this genre. That is way too self-pitying to listen to in a song, in my opinion. I mean, have I had doubts? Yes. Do I see where people would relate to this? Yes. But it's just so whiny. Like,
You're gonna make me laugh. Jesus Christ. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it's a glorification, and like you said, you can see where people could come in, but it's something I never understood either. Why sing about that? Again, it's our own opinions too, you know?
Yes, but I think there are better ways to go about these valid emotions musically.
Heard.
But these emo artists are just not strong enough songwriters to come up with something better than this. And in my opinion, that's an issue. And that's why I don't listen to this. And this is maybe going to make me sound like an asshole, but I kind of just want to say, put on your big boy pants and stop whining. Just stop. At least the vocals aren't as whiny as they are from Blink-182, but...
You going that Blink-182 today.
I really am. I'm just... No, this one really fired me up a lot. Actually, no, this is my least favorite. It's not bad musically. The other one I said was boring, but no, I don't like this attitude. I don't like these lyrics. If you're going to go about it, you got to go about it differently. This is just not it. Like, this is not these are the same guys earlier in the album. You wrote The Middle for us.
Heard.
This great pick-me-up song. Things will get better. And you're going to end on such a down note? Like,
yep.
No, I don't like that.
Well, see, I tried to really sit back and I went back and forth with this thought as well. And then I was like, man, come on, you grew up in the grunge era. We were crybaby, you know, we were trying not to be cool to be cool. And I really tried to draw that line, but that's where I ended up being, is like the difference from like where they are mentally in this album period. I won't even do the whole genre in this album period. It's like,
yeah,
if you look back at those grunge albums, maybe you get like Smells Like Teen Spirit, but that still ain't, you know, the middle. You know, that's still not the happy-go-lucky jam of the year. So it's something that I'm just working into. I'm trying to understand it more and more. This was a cool dive, though. You know, let's finishing with me on my Sundown. It's cool. It's one of the ones that should have been on that Go Big Casino. I don't understand how it fits here, and I don't know. This second half was really lackluster. I got some really fun things out of this album. I got some really cool takes. I got 3 songs for playlists out of this album, but this second half, man, it was tough. It really was tough. That's with all of the predisposition that I had for this genre. It just, as a critical mind, as we do, strip it down and do it like it's first time we heard it. This second half was tough.
I completely agree with you. And before I give my grade, I'm going to say something that's going to shock you.
What up?
So your mention of grunge, as we know, if you've been listening for a bit, Kurt Cobain wasn't my favorite songwriter or person we've discussed on this podcast. However, I'm going to give the guy some credit here. When it came to that self-pitying feeling, he knew how to articulate it in a song better than these emo bands did. He, I think, did that pretty well. I'm not going to lie. If you do want to listen to that self-pitying thing, he knew how to write a song about it. He was just a stronger songwriter than a lot of his ancestors, I guess you could say. Because I guess this is the path that Nirvana helped create to an extent, but it's a never-ending path, you know.
Yeah.
This is taking from grunge. In some ways, in some ways you could say evolution from that sound as we move into the 2000s. I would actually say it's a devolution. That's really harsh, but it is, in my opinion, a devolution.
Heard.
So, yeah. What's your grade for the album?
You said you were doing yours first.
Oh, I did. This is a C for me. There were some really cool songs on it that I added to my playlist. The middle, of course, is a classic. I'm not going to take anything away from it. And I did try to be fair. This is not my favorite genre at all, but not all the tunes stacked up. And that was the issue. And that's a bit of a problem when you have a really dynamic single like The Middle. You gotta have the rest of it stack up. And for some people it did. For me, it did.
Yep. I'm actually at a C. I almost went C plus, but I really feel like where this album came off so beautifully hit heavy and just really well-rounded in the first 3 to 4, just the first half of this album. The way it ended left me to believe that someone dropped the ball. It's very, very poorly put together as an album, as far as, for me, the way I feel an album should go. Regardless of that, musically, it's there too. Unfortunately, I find a lot of the same sound and redundancy throughout this album, and it's tough to really get past it over and over again, listening-wise. Again, music is beautiful, and whoever gets whatever they get out of listening to whatever genre, more power to you. I thank you guys as listeners for throwing this one in our laps, because we learned, or I'll speak for myself, I learned new things about music history, period. I found some neat, smart things inside of the Jimmy Eat World mission statement, I guess you could say, the way they go about doing their music. And at the very least, I listened to an album that I had never listened to before. So in those silver lining playbook thoughts, thank you for this one.
Yes, and I will say these guys are definitely hard workers. I won't take anything away from them for that. I am glad that they had the success that they had with this album. They did really work hard for it. It just, unfortunately, is not my favorite album I've ever heard. But more power to them. I'm glad it did speak to people. Just not for me quite, and just could have been stronger. But what are you gonna do? I guess they can't all be A's.
And they never will all be A's. No. These guys are, like you said, hard worker. Their live performances are pretty cool and pretty like they get the crowd going, and you can't take that away from them either. So we're judging this album. That's what I always that's what I always end up saying to a lot of people as we go through with opinions on different albums and talking to people who have heard it. We're not doing groups. We're doing albums, and that C is for this album.
Yes, it is, but. Do I think this would be a cool band to see at a festival? Absolutely. I'll say that right now. But album itself, just not our favorite.
Sure.
What's your favorite song?
Oh, favorite song on the whole album? I had 2 here, but I'm gonna go right to Sweetness. Is I found a new love for that track. I used to hate that track, but there's some great production inside of it.
Okay. I'm going to be basic and say The Middle. Just a beautiful feel-good song that I've always enjoyed when I heard it, and one that eclipses the pop-punk genre. And also, I wanted to say this. I feel like The Middle should have been the theme song to the TV show The Middle. That used to be one of my favorite shows, actually. I used to watch that religiously. It's been off the air for a few years now, but I used to love that show.
That would have been cool.
It was featured at the end of the pilot episode, but then it probably was expensive for them to pay for the rights to it, I'm sure, but...
At that point, oh yeah.
I think that would have been so awesome, but that's just me in fantasy land, so... But, hey, if you haven't, you can watch The Middle if you want a nice feel-good show. And, with that being said, it's kind of funny we talk about all the sadness they were talking about, and we're going on to a sad one to end out our month, a heartbreak classic of an album to many. This is one that we both agreed on. It was a runner-up for you as a pick for this decade.
It was.
And for me, it was a curiosity because it's one I'm embarrassed to admit I have not listened to the whole way through before.
I was going to say, for me, it ain't that sad of an album. There's some sad tunes, but I don't want to get too far down in there. I feel you. I say that in part because of the artist, admittedly. Heard.
Because we will be discussing Amy Winehouse's Back to Black. And
you've never listened to it all the way through.
I have not, which is crazy.
I love it. I love it.
I'm ready to finally do it, and I'm really looking forward to examining this one. I think it'll be a really interesting one to do, and I don't want to say too much more about it beyond that. Just let's go. Back to Black. Let's go. That's all I can say about it. But
there's going to be some tea, so that's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Yeah. Oh, no. It'll be a good one to dive into. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for that, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it. Leave us a nice review and rating. That would also be really appreciated. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Turntables and Tea Podcast. And if you're feeling really nice, you can support us through Anchor via a monthly donation. That would be greatly appreciated too, because that money is not just to fill our pockets. It is used to help produce this podcast and make it better. And that's what we want to do for you. So just keep that in mind if you want us to keep producing quality content. We'll keep doing it, of course, but any way we can make it better, we want to. But in the meantime, everything will be all right, even if you're in the middle. No better way I can think of to end this.
Most definitely.
Stay tuned until we go back to black.
Peace.